Welcome back to another episode of Singapore's Real Estate Explained, brought to you by the JNA Investments team. And today we'll be talking about
this land bid, they came out, but there's zero bid for it. So what's exactly happening?
Yeah, so we've heard, it's not the first time, right, that government actually released land, and it's not like the developer actually lowball the pricing. It's really that there is nobody that actually bidded for it. So today we'll talk about what are some of the land plots that, nobody bidded for it, and what does that exactly mean for the market, and what does that exactly mean for you?
Yeah, so when I see this kind of news, it's actually very exciting. It just means there's a lot of fear in the market. And when there's fear, there's actually opportunity. And with that, I think we will be running deep into the numbers to see how does it impact investors and what kind of action can we take when it comes to investing in property.
And before we start, if you're an investment buyer in the market looking for your next investment home and you want to speak to anyone from the investment team, do scan our QR code and we'll have someone reach out to you.
And as usual, before we start, I'd like to thank all our clients who supported us. Currently, we serve 722 investment clients with an annualized return of 19.56%. Thank you all for your support and look to continue to generate more content to value to you as a property investor. And also, we have garnered over 161 good reviews, 5-star. And I thank all our clients that support us and took out time to give us a good review.
Yep, and thank you for all who subscribe to our channel and support our videos. So if you haven't subscribed, do click the subscribe button also.
Alright, so much further ado, let's start.
So let's talk about exactly where Media Circle is. Just like what the name suggests, it's actually near where MediaCorp is, which is where One North is.
And this area is actually a new area. It haven't been developed for some time, but the first time that they developed a residential area in the Media Circle One North area. Yeah, and one of the bids that came out just recently, Parcel B.
Zero bids.
Zero bids. No one want to bid for it. And people were panicking. What's happening? They don't want to bid for it. Is it a land plot that people don't want? But with this, I think we'll unpack, what does it mean for investor and where are the opportunities when take a look at when it comes to seeing this news?
So I think besides this plot that hasn't gotten any bids, Media Circle actually have a couple of plots, and the latest launch is actually Bloomsbury. So this area is like another lentor. Where, in the past, there wasn't many residential areas, and now the government is actually releasing these different plots. And like how Guoco and Hong Leong took over Lentor, I think Qingjian is trying to be the monopoly in this area also.
Yes, so first up, we had Bloomsbury Residences that launched just this month. And you can see, during the first launch, there were a total of 3 bidders that bidded for this. So it was quite, I would say, decent, where we had Qingjian win the bid just by
a little bit, which is a good job done on Qingjian's side.
Yes, they overbid the land. Okay, and the second land that came out was actually Media Circle Parcel A. Okay, so this particular plot that came out, was also bidded by Qingjian. And in fact, Qingjian actually won the bid once again.
And not too much of a difference also. And I say there is enough interest at that time for this area.
Yes, correct. And then there was a third bid that came out, in between, which is called the SA2 site. This is a Media Circle SA2. It's a 60-year lease by government, and it's only used for service apartments.
So it's like a new scheme that the government is trying to experiment with, but apparently it's not very popular with the developers.
Yeah, so they actually bidded the PSF very low at 461 per square feet. It's cheaper than farmland. It's just very something that in the end it went unawarded because it's really way too low. Yeah. And it shows that government actually did try their best to actually maintain the bid, maintain the price within the area.
So I think in summary, when you look at Media Circle as a whole, we actually have four plots. One of it is Bloomsbury that has already been launched. Second one is the service apartment that that the developer actually lowballed and the government didn't award. And then we have Parcel A that Qingjian actually bidded also, and the last plot, Parcel B, which is the most recent one that received 0 bids.
Yeah, so with this, let's jump into the reason why this happened. Okay, so for the first reasons, it's definitely the US tariffs. This land plot launched really at a bad time, like how Bloomsbury and One Marina Garden really came out at the wrong time. And it's during a time when market is very uncertain.
Yeah.
So being divided themselves, a lot of them are now looking at a wait and see approach to see how things goes rather than aggressively bidding the land. And that actually results in a low confidence level. And this translates to even the recent launch, as mentioned, some Bloomsbury and your One Marina Garden that currently is 30% and 40% sold. Yeah, so you can see even the consumers are waiting and seeing.
Yep, and I think from a developer's point of view, when this tariff happened, right, there's a lot of uncertainty on, hey, how is my construction cost going to be like? How are my materials going to be like? So they would rather, I would say, see how things are going to turn out before they even put a bid for it. So one of the main reasons is really the timing on when this plot actually launched.
Correct. And with that, US, Trump even say, US keep may have 2 doors in your 30. This is the most recent news. They're still going strong. currently in a good negotiation between China and also other countries have things are much better already. But with this uncertainty, developers are now even doing a wait and see approach.
Correct.
Right.
And the second one we will look at is that it's a non-mature estate. So I think One North area has always been like a research hub, right? It's a business area or it's like media policies over there. It has never been known to be a residential area. It's not like Clementi or Toa Payoh. It's like how Lentor in the past, there was just no, besides like the landed estate, there wasn't any condos over there. So I think this is a new area that the government is trying to release or try to plan out, but it's just not the first thing on people's mind when they think of, hey, a residential area or a mature estate.
Okay, so one thing to note is this is a non-mature estate. So people have yet to move there. The place have yet to try and test it. It's very similar to last time. There's this Punggol area, Digital District. It first came out, you had Central, Spark Central, you had Watertown. It was a new estate that people don't really know how it will turn out.
Yep.
So of course, when people approach that kind of projects, they'll feel like, wow, would there be certain things that will be appearing in the market? Would there be certain demand that can drive the market? So with that, right, usually at the start, the ticket rate is not as high.
Yeah, but we also look at like examples later on, right, where areas are not the most mature, and there was like a development came out how they actually perform also.
Yes, correct. All
Okay.
right.
Okay, the next one is that because there are multiple plots, developer also want to bid for like the better plots. And unfortunately, this plot is not the most ideal as compared to the rest because it's towards the highway side. So
Yes.
there are bound to be units or stacks that have to face the highway. And potentially when you compare with the other developments, if buyers had a choice, they may not pick the highway facing one. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a land attribute that makes it even harder for people to bid for it. Okay, and one more thing to take note, it's actually the furthest away from One North MRT. Okay, compare Parcel A or Bloomsbury, which goes down, it's actually much nearer to One North area. This is actually the furthest land plot away. And also, okay, one thing to take note is that because of Trump and all this market fear, the market take-up rate wasn't as fast in the market right now. So even Bloomsbury, they launched in 25.14%. Now it's about 30% take-up. What happened is that the developer also wants to take a more defensive strategy to see
Because
hey,
there is still current inventory in the market.
And also, there's another last plot coming up within the Cambridge area, Science Park area, which is Sema Science Park, Lindenwood.
Yep.
Okay, so developer also want to see how this perform before making the decision whether to bid for the land.
Correct. So fun fact, this is actually, it's not under the GLS, it's actually a building that has been owned by Capital Land. So it's a very similar concept to where Jayden is right now. It was JCube in the past and then they applied for, residential usage. So this is the same thing that's going to happen. And usually for Capital Land, they don't usually launch cheap.
Yes,
based on
and
their past records.
one more thing, they love big layout. So the quantum won't be as cheap as what you think. So one thing to take note is with this, right, that sets the benchmark in this area. And also the unit size tend to be bigger for Capital Land, so the quantum will not be cheap. Right?
Yep.
So with this, okay, let's assess. Well, now we have this market fear. There's a zero bid. How does it affect investor? And how should we think?
Yes.
So when the market have a lot of fear, okay, the very natural way of how investors invest, they will as a fear, let's not invest. But we found out one thing very interesting. In the past, you see a lot of case study. When there's a market fear, people don't dare take action. But we have data and facts and figures that shows otherwise. And looking at what exactly is the entry price to enter, people who actually bought in back then, they are able to capitalize on this opportunity.
Yep. So I think the first one that's very similar to today's market is actually the Trump tariff in 2018, which was then followed by COVID.
Yes.
So at that time, it was like the uncertainty of uncertainty because at that,
Correct.
really nobody know like how long COVID is going to last.
Correct. So this Trump tariff actually came in 2018 where they had a very aggressive trade war with China for almost 2 years. 2018 last to 2020 end. And with COVID-19 coming in, they said, okay, let's stop this whole thing. Let's get it settled. But one thing they know, there were a few launches that came out during that time. There's so much market uncertainty. People don't dare to enter. And let's see how they perform. Okay, so first up, okay, very interestingly, Treasure Tampines. So this project, if you know, nowadays is the place that they really a lot of people make money.
It's very well known in today's market because of how much profit the owners actually make.
But what people don't know is on launch day, okay, the number of units sold.
It wasn't the most hype launch at that time because it wasn't near the MRT and it wasn't in the best location.
And it's only 13% sold on launch day. 289 units, very little units out of 2,200 units. So people back then, the narrative was very interesting. Back then, we are on the ground shouting cheapest condo in the market. So we were at the Paya Lebar when I first started a few years in. And people were just saying, wow, the market's so uncertain. There's COVID-19 coming, there's Trump tariffs. They say that this doesn't make sense anymore. Why would we buy here? And this project will flop. That was the common narrative of the market.
Yeah.
And look, fast forward today. Let's see how it performed. Is that you can see the profit margin made for 3 billion premium is 400k to 500k. And then people say, oh, if only I bought it back then. So it's very interesting. The market always react with fear when data shows back then it was the cheapest in the market. And there were a lot of land bids that come out in the next few years that can benchmark these prices.
Of course, to note that, when times are uncertain, I think you have to be a bit more prudent, meaning,
Yes.
yes, it's safe, but also make sure that your finances are right. You actually set aside your safety net just to prevent like worst case scenario, anything happens. You know that you won't be in a situation where you can't pay for your mortgage. I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, indeed. All right. And let's take a look at another example. Florent Residence. This iconic. Now people say make a decent amount of profit. D19, how come not near MRT? 4-5 bus stops on MRT in the middle of nowhere. And 1,400 units. And for Florence, when it launched on 2019, which in the midst of tariffs, when the trade war going on, a lot of market noises, there's only 6% sold.
Which is, I think today's market is something in 6%. So
Yes, people lose confidence in project and just back out. Yeah, and interestingly, over the years, units are being taken up. And today, let's see how much the 3 billion premium make is a healthy 300k to 400 plus, up to even 500k in terms of profit margin. So you can see the launch day performance or how market feel today when there's a lot of fear does not determine the final profits you make at the end of the day. Because one thing to note is when people buy when there's a lot of fear, developers tend to launch it at a cheaper price. They tend to be a bit more apprehensive.
Because developers know that the market sentiment is not as good, and to entice people, then they actually release it at a much safer price that market will accept. That's why if you go and look at Bloomsbury, right, actually on launch day, their jump wasn't very big.
Yes,
because I think developer also know that the market sentiment is not there.
And the thing is, when we look at the final profit they can make, it's always 3 years later, 4 years later. So we need to assess the environment later on. How will it be? Will it be a low interest rate environment? Will it be a more positive outlook environment? And that is when we can actually leverage on this margin to make a more informed choice.
Yeah, so I think something unique about the real estate market is that it's very different from stock market because it's not the most liquid investment. You have to hold for 3 years because there's an SSD, right? So unlike like stocks, right, today you buy, people get emotional, tomorrow they sell, or it's something that you can liquid overnight. This one is like 3-year holding period. So when we look at it, the horizon has to be longer also.
Correct. All right. And next one, very interesting, Jovel. Okay, this project, same thing, launched on the day when Trump really said tariffs got a problem. And on launch day, only 9.6% sold on a launch month. In fact, launch day only less than 3% sold. And
not surprisingly, because it's again not the best location where Jovel is actually at Flora Drive. Flora Drive is at Loyang area.
Yes.
There was a joke in the past that they say, if you buy anything within this area to buy a loaf of bread, you have to travel 10 minutes before you can even get a bread.
But thank God, now there's a bus stop.
Things have changed already today.
Yeah, finally, there's a bus stop coming after the past 1 year. And but one thing to note, when the project it flopped on launch day, okay, at the end of the day, how much you make? It was actually close to about 240 to 300k. So for 3 billion, people say, it's not like 300-400, but what you need to note is that people who bought back then, they actually made on average about 18% because they didn't buy at the 1.2, which made 300-400k. They bought at the 900k to 1 million
so
range.
The amount that they put in or the equity that they put in was much lower also.
Correct. So actually, effectively, it could be a ROE of close to 60-70% based on down payment, which is quite decent. Average out to about close to 20% compounded per annum. So there's some things that we look at and realize that end of the day, people who are fearful back then, who don't pull the trigger, it's all because of market fear, irrational fear, rather than looking at number and data to make a decision.
Yeah. Okay, next example we'll look at is Key Residences, also launched during the COVID period. And funny enough, I think when people talk about location, if you don't have an MRT, at least have a bus stop.
Yes.
And Key Residence to walk to the bus stop is at least a 10 minutes walk.
No MRT, no bus stop.
No MRT, no bus stop, correct. But let's see how they perform.
Yep. And if you look at launch day, 26% sold. Okay, it's something that it really flopped. It was really, 2020 is very interesting. It was really end of the tariffs.
Yeah.
I mean, things were still very uncertain. Then COVID-19 came, that forced the whole world to really, okay, let's cut this entire tariffs thing and support because the whole economy was really going on the downturn. And on launch day, only 26% sold. Okay, and let's see how it performed today. For somewhere that's not near MRT, not anywhere, but the cheapest in the entire Singapore back then, they actually make, okay, on average of 383 all the way up to 500k in profit for the 3 beta premium.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that is common in between is that people who bought back then, who are having the courage, not because of blind courage, blind faith, but rather assessing based on data, numbers, and enter the market, understanding how Singapore landscape work, they're able to leverage on this kind of opportunity to step into a market and make profit out from it, right? And if you look at other development, not just one, there are other former examples which because of the time we won't be going through one by one. Daintree Residences, Sika Red had also launched during tariffs time. VA Kismis also about the period before COVID-19 came in. Park Clementi, same thing. And Nomenda Park was during COVID-19.
Which is nearby also.
Nearby also. You can see 40%, 21%, 22%, and 32.2% take rate.
I think market is very used to because from last year to this year, right? Like the hot launches like EOK or
Yes.
their take-up rates are like maybe 80%, 90%. I think that to a certain extent, the market is prime in saying that, okay, this is the normal take-up rate that a market should have, or a development should have, I'm sorry. And then when they see a development hit like 20+%, they say, oh no, is there something wrong?
Yes.
Or, like there is a bit of fear because then there's such a huge drastic drop in the take-up rate also.
Correct, because of market sentiments. And one thing to note is that even with those bad sentiments back then, you can see today the market, the 3-bedder profit is ranging from 400k to even 500k.
Yep.
Okay, and at least about 350k. So there's something that we notice when the market is fearful, there is always opportunity. But the key must be prudent. Don't just buy any project in the market because of market fear. Because of this opportunity, but be very sensitive on numbers, the data, and from that make a more informed decision.
Okay. And then I think the next reason that we have is that there are actually quite a few plots coming out. In fact, I think this year the government is releasing quite a bit of land.
Yes.
And as a developer, if you have limited funds that you can fire, you want to fire it for the best. Like how, from an investment point of view, if you're going to buy a property, you want to buy the right one, right?
Correct.
And knowing that, there are other opportunities coming up and interesting plots, like let's say Chuan Grove, Lakeside Drive, there's next the MRT, there is like the Teluk Blangah Road. So that there is quite a few plots over here. Then, developers say, okay, maybe I will hold my funds for something else that's coming up that they feel the market may have more natural draw to it.
Yes. And also there are other reserve list sites that will be next year or next year. There's Marina Gardens, Holland Play, Media Circle, Real Valley Green, Punggol Walk, etc. But one thing to note that, interestingly, unlike the 2018-2019 period where there were like 40,000, 50,000 supply in the market today is very different. Okay, which is also why the take-up rate wasn't very high back then, because a lot of supply coming in, 50,000 units already there. But today, we only have about 7,000 or 10,000 units left in the market. Inventory is not as high as last time. So there's something that developers, yes, they're waiting, but it's not in a season where there's oversupply.
Yeah. Okay, you hear like a lot of plots coming up, but they are not mega launches because in the past, a development could be like 1,000 plus, 2,000 units. Today, you don't really see so many like mega launches. So even though like you hear a lot of plots, there are like maybe like couple hundred, 500, 600. So when you add together, there isn't many units.
So the 7 to 10,000, now another 10,000 plus is only 20,000. It's not a huge supply that's coming in.
Okay, so the next thing you'll look at is then what are the past GLS that actually went without bids, because this is not the only plot that had 0 bids or 0 interest from a developer.
Correct. All right, so let's take a look at the first one, which is Upper Thomson Road. Okay, so this one, Parcel A. Okay, there were no tender received for this site. Okay, and the rationale is because this was a new idea. Okay, they want to pair it with service apartment.
Yep.
So developer have to develop service apartment and not be able to sell.
They cannot sell. Yeah.
Yes, and this is a very new area once again with a new concept. This is something that allows a developer to be a little more fearful. So it's not just Media Circle. There are other areas that similar.
This is the same one. This is the same service apartment scheme that the developer actually low bid at Media Circle.
Yes, correct. And as compared to Real Valley, which actually did pass through because of aspects and all these things, developers are not very confident to be able to develop something like this. And to develop a service apartment, not just like any developer can do. Usually there are developers that are specific, that is quite linked to hotel groups, linked to experience in running service apartment, co-living. So without all this experience, the pool of developer who want to bid for this land is even lower. Right?
So next time we'll talk about lands that there were interest, developer bidded, but opposite way, the government want to sell.
Correct. And there were actually 2 main plots. Okay, first one is actually Jurong Lakeside. It was, like transformation, a new plot, a new place. But in the end, the bid wasn't awarded because they find that the person who bidded for this land, the concept was great, but it was too low.
Yep.
Okay, so this is actually a very good sign. Okay, so for me, when no bids coming in, or developer not being able to bid because land bid is too low, it's a way of how government protect the land price in Singapore. Yeah, and this itself, right, allow the government to always be increasing the land bids such that the developer can bid higher and higher to push out the prices in Singapore overall. Okay, and if you look at the land bid, you can look at the fine print, the remark. They mentioned that after evaluating the concept proposal, okay, one of the proposals was shortlisted, but because the price was too low, in the end, they decided not to give this land.
So this plot is actually back on the reserve list again. So basically how the developer government works, right, is that all plots go on a reserve list first, and then a developer comes in to put interest if they're interested for that particular plot, and they'll put, okay, what's the minimum price I will bid for it? And if that minimum price hits the government's reserve price, then they will shift it up to the confirm list.
And this is very interesting because you see at Jurong Lake District, right, there's this other development called Jayden.
They did very well.
Did very well. 80+%. So now it's at 93%. And if you look at it, this Jaden was actually JCube converted to residential.
Yeah.
Very popular. But even with a popular development that's launched in the area, Jurong Lake District, there's no bidder. Yeah, so it doesn't mean that the area that has a very popular means people will bid for a land. And it doesn't mean that when there's no one bidding for that land,
It won't do well.
It won't do well. Yeah, so there's something that people must dive into deep in the numbers to figure out what exactly the interest value for that property rather than simply say that, oh, this area is not good at all, right?
Okay, another example that we have is Marina Garden Crescent site. It was also something that a bid was received, but the government see that it's too low to actually be released.
Yes, and this is Marina area, but they're bidding really at RCR, even OCR prices. So it's one way of how the government actually protect the land. They rather keep the land and not let developer bid for it, rather than releasing low and causing the market to crash later on, and developer are suddenly panicking and lowering a lower bid. So there's something that the government is always there to protect the land prices in Singapore.
Yeah. So I think in summary, these are a few reasons why we felt, maybe why the developer or Ting Tian didn't, or maybe even other developers actually didn't bid for this plot. Firstly, because timing was wrong.
Yes.
It's not an area that has a natural draw, but we've also seen, past developments that, location at the start and take-up rate wasn't strong, but they still performed well. And it really is just in a wait and see approach, which we are also feeling in the market that, a lot of the buyers are not that the sellers are in a hurry to sell, but buyers are saying, hey, the sentiments is maybe we can wait and see what's going on.
And this is also found in the resale market where our sell side team, they also been experienced a slowdown in the market. Their buyers are holding back instead of 8 to 10 viewings, even HDB market even. Going in, we see that the market is getting a bit slower. People are really just waiting and seeing, but because they don't have the right data to make a decision in these uncertain times.
So I think it's in these uncertain times that it's even more important that you have to make sure that analysis and numbers done right, especially if you're buying for investment purchase, and really to make sure that you're not over leveraging your purchase also.
And most importantly, when the market is fearful, uncertain, and people are saying, don't buy, let's wait and wait. That is when, for more savvy investors, if you have access to certain data, certain research, certain things that the market may not know about, and you have an advantage to take a first mover in it, that is when they capitalize on this kind of opportunity to be able to make a more informed decision and buy the right product in the market.
Correct. But I think buyers are always still very emotional. So I think majority of the buyers are still, they still prefer to buy when the market is high.
That's
when everybody is hyping it up and the prices are way higher, they feel like, okay, got demand and got hype. And even though it's on a high price, they feel confident to enter.
Correct.
Naturally, that's how a normal buyer would work.
Yes, which is good for our investors because we are able to assess data that when people are fearful, we are greedy. We are greedy, we are fearful. So those launches that, people say, I can buy, it's the best buy in the market, you should go and buy. Where people crowd and buy, we actually have a counter way of assessing, we actually walk away. But when people say, this place is not so great, or why is there, there's a lot of fear in the market, we're able to assess and find deals. And from there, interestingly, 4 or 5 years ago, we found this kind of deals where people are just not interested. But after that, what we see is 3 years down in the crystal ball, we realize that, hey, the demand actually comes 3 years later. You look at the time 3 months later.
So if you're someone that's looking at the market and you have any questions that you want to clarify with us, you can also reach out to us through our WhatsApp QR code and we have someone reach out to you. With that, we'll see you next time. This is Grace.
This is Christian.
Bye-bye.
Bye.